Before there was Prince and before there was Michael Jackson, there was a rock and roll pioneer artist named Little Richard.
Oh. Hey, Richard, welcome. Come sit down, won't you? Oh, my. You are among friends, you can tell.
Hi, so welcome to this episode of History Hunters. I'm here at the Oakwood Memorial Garden Cemetery in Huntsville, Alabama, and here to visit the man who's buried in that grave right there. You know him as Little Richard, the famous performer from the 1950s. We're in a very peaceful area north of Huntsville, actually north of the Space Center, and all you have to do is find these three crosses in the corner. The northwest corner of the cemetery. And right here is the grave of Richard Wayne Penniman, Little Richard, December 5th, 1932 to May 9th, 2020. Deeply loved by family, friends, and fans. Somebody's left him some silk flowers here. And right down here, check it out. Pictures of him. Right here it says, well, we can pick, no. It says a beloved friend with a giant heart and a God-given talent. Can't make that out. I love alone. Can't quite make that out, but there's a image of him right there. Silk flowers. Look at this. Somebody left the Guitar Center. Area code 205 and a penny, and somebody left this little thing here. Richard Wayne Penniman was born in Macon, Georgia on December 5th, 1932, the third of 12 children. Nicknamed Little Richard by his family because he was small and skinny, he was a mischievous child who played pranks on his neighbors. He had a slight deformity that left one of his legs shorter than the other. This produced an unusual gait, and he was mocked for his effeminate appearance. He began singing in church and taking piano lessons at a young age. His father kicked him out of the house when he was 15, later telling Richard that he wanted 7 boys and that Richard spoiled it for being gay.
I didn't obey my father. I didn't do what he wanted me to do, and so he told me I had to get out. I was gay, and he says that I wanted 7 boys, and you're messing it up. Mm-hmm. And my brother's name was Charles, so I would go out in the yard and call him. I had a high voice. I would say, Charles! He said, I'm going to kill you tonight. He said, I'm going to kill you, because I was really flamboyant, so my people didn't like it. So my dad said, you either follow this rule or get out. Yeah. So I got out.
As a teenager, he performed with traveling minstrel shows for which he was billed as Little Richard. By the early 1950s, Richard was one of the pioneers in rock and roll music, a hyperkinetic rhythmic musical style that fused rhythm and blues, boogie-woogie beats, and a slightly emotive gospel style of singing and shouting.
If you hadn't come along, maybe rock and roll would have started differently or later. I'm sure it would have started sooner or later.
I don't believe it would have got started at all. Really? I was the architect of rock. I started playing the piano and I made up Tutti Frutti.
In 1955, at the age of 22, his fame skyrocketed with the release of his first big hit, Tutti Frutti. Other big hits followed, all featuring uninhibited vocals, edgy saxophone solos, and frenetic piano accompaniments. His next hit came in 1956 with Long Tall Sally, which went to number 1 on the Billboard Rhythm and Blues bestsellers chart. Followed by a rapid succession of 15 or more in less than 3 years.
Lucille, you won't do your Uncle Bill.
2 years into his fame, Richard was troubled by his music and lifestyle. During an outdoor concert in Sydney, Australia in 1957, the Russian satellite Sputnik appeared overhead, and to Richard it seemed like a sign from God. He stopped the concert abruptly and was determined to commit his life fully to God.
At first I was making $35,000 a night, then it came to $50,000, then it came to $100,000 an hour. I didn't feel right anymore. I made up my mind that I'd rather have Jesus than anything the world could afford today.
For much of his career, he was torn between what he called the gravity of the pulpit and the pull of the stage. During the summer of 1958, Richard was preaching in Washington, D.C. and explained to his audience that he made as much as $10,000 a day, but was glad to lay it all aside as nothing compared with what Jesus had done for him. In 1967, after a 5-year hiatus from rock music, concert promoter Don Arden persuaded Little Richard to perform in Europe, and over the next 2 years, his opening acts included the Beatles and the Rolling Stones, both at the start of their meteoric rise.
You've worked with the Beatles, have you not?
I've just finished a tour with the Beatles. In fact, I toured with the Beatles right before they made their first hit, and I was the star of the show. You wouldn't believe it.
No, I could believe it, but you mean they weren't heard of at that point?
They have never made a record at the time, and I accepted them on my show through Germany. I was with them for 15 days.
They're all doing your material. They're doing Chuck Berry's material. Of course, they're doing their own. Who's the biggest star in England right now?
The Rolling Stones.
Really?
Yeah.
Have they taken over from the Beatles?
Well, I just left England about 4 weeks ago. I did a tour over in England and Germany and all. And the Rolling Stones, they're number one in England at the present time.
Little Richard's recording of The Girl Can't Help It was used in the 1956 Jane Mansfield movie by the same name. It is his voice you hear singing as she wiggles across town before every oogling man who sees her.
The girl can't help it, she was born to please. Can't help it, the girl can't help it.
His music was also used in Don't Knock the Rock in 1956, and he also had a cameo screen role singing in Scuba Party in 1967.
We gonna dive in and swim all about, move around just like the top. Now at the party.
In 1977, having reached the crisis point due to use of alcohol and cocaine, Penniman returned to the church and evangelism. For 8 years, he focused on recording Christian music and evangelism. In 1984, Penniman openly discussed his struggles with drugs and sexuality, describing himself through the years as, quote, variously as gay, bisexual, and omnisexual. He later said he wasn't gay, and in 2009 said, quote, although I sing rock and roll, God still loves me. I'm a rock and roll singer, but I'm still a Christian.
God gave me the victory. I'm not gay now, but I was gay all my life. I believe I was one of the first gay people to come out. But God let me know that he made Adam be with Eve, not Steve.
After his induction into the new Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 1986, Little Richard found renewed interest and he appeared in movies and on TV shows. In a 2017 TV appearance on Three Angels Broadcasting Network, he made this appeal.
And I'm going to tell you something, brothers and sisters. Get on your knees and talk to Jesus. Don't you go to bed another night, another day, without giving a commitment to God. The world is getting ready to end. Jesus is getting ready to burst the clouds. Please, please, give your life to Jesus.
In his 80s, Penniman was plagued by health problems, complicated by failed hip and back surgeries in 2009 that left him confined to a wheelchair. He was living in Tullahoma, Tennessee when he died of bone cancer on May 9th, 2020. He was laid to rest here at Oakwood University's Oakwood Memorial Gardens in Huntsville on May 20th, 2020. So were any of you fans of Little Richard? I'm curious if you are, and kind of what songs do you like? He was certainly a powerhouse in the entertainment industry. So apparently the cemetery was dedicated in 2002 by Pastor Eric Calvin Ward of the Oakwood College Church. I understand this is an all-black cemetery. I've fought a good fight, I've finished my course, I've kept the faith. Much younger than I was. Let's see why there's an American flag planted right here. Oh, we have a Vietnam Army veteran right here. Now, this is not something you see every day, but there's a grave that's open right here. And this soil is amazing. Look how red it is. It's like clay. But man, how would you like to be coming out here at dark and finding out that This is for the grave of Ambrose Hunt, October 6, 2024. He's a military vet, but I'm wondering why they left a hole open. I mean, he's not even around. It's kind of dangerous. I'm in Florence, Alabama, and I'm here at the birthplace of W.C. Handy, William. I think Christopher Handy is his name. Born here in 1873 at this cabin, this two-room cabin. His grandparents, his parents lived here, and then later his brother were born here. He lived here until about the age of 17, 18. He left here for greener pastures to become a teacher, and he went on to gain great fame as a blues artist. This is it. I've been told that this wood is the actual wood from the cabin, and the chinking inside, I believe, is new. Obviously, they had to do some preservation work, but this apparently was cut by the family way back. I'm not sure if the chimney's been redone. It's very possible. It looks like a newer chimney. But yeah, this really conjures up images of the blacks in the South. Very quaint cabin. Let's go up here and look at this, but you kind of see the marks, the axis X marks here. This is all authentic wood, I've been told. It's very cool. Even though this looks like it may be a primitive dwelling back in the 1870s, this was good living, and I would bet that some people today that want to live off the grid would mind actually living in a cabin like this, even though it's very small. Of course, today there's been a trend for small houses as well. W.C. Handy was born on November 16th, 1873, the son of a pastor of a small church. He was born in this cabin built by his grandfather, William Wise Handy, who became an African Methodist Episcopal minister after the Emancipation Proclamation. Handy's father believed that musical instruments were tools of the devil, so without his parents' permission, young Handy bought his first guitar, which he saved up the money for by picking berries and nuts and making lye soap. Upon seeing the guitar, his father asked him, "What possessed you to bring that sinful thing like that into our Christian home?" and ordered him to take it back from where it came from. The guitar was returned, and his father arranged for his son to take organ lessons, which did not last long. Handy moved on, however, to play the cornet. He joined a local band as a teenager, but he kept that secret from his parents. He purchased a cornet from a fellow band member and spent every free minute practicing it. So it's actually a museum dedicated to W.C. Handy. A lot of people don't even know who he is, but it's 30 minutes before closing time. I'm going to go in and check it out and see what they have inside of the museum. I'm in the actual room that he was born in. There's just 2 rooms in here. The lady here said, well, he wasn't born in the kitchen, so it had to have been here that he was born. Possibly right here on this corner. This is supposedly the original cabin in which W.C. Handy was born, and he lived, I guess, until the age of 17, I believe is what she said. I mean, this is just amazing. Apparently the grandparents and his mother and his brother was born later, but they all lived here. I guess this is an organ. Definitely gives you a feel for how people lived back in the day. I can imagine 5 people living in here. Gee whiz. Very close-knit family, I'm sure. Of course, he went on to achieve great musical fame. I even believe he's on the U.S. postage stamp. And I see a lot of Christian artwork in here. Let's go in the kitchen to show you what that looks like. But first, check this out. Here's the kitchen. Not sure where the stove would have been. That horn there. I'm sure that came much later. There's a tapestry of Jesus up there. This is pretty much it. Just 2 rooms. It's crazy to think about some great musicians of our American history, one being born right here. Well, look at this very colorful quilt. I'm sure it's not part of what was here in the family, but multicolors is pretty cool. It's a treasure trove of W.C. Handy memorabilia. There's books. There's one that he edited. Records. Oh my gosh, look at this. George Gershwin signed this book. Oh gosh. Keep Forever, he wrote on this booklet titled Government. Below he wrote, I paid 25 cents for this. I would not be without it for $250. His signature and home addresses are displayed here on this day planner. Here is his signature on a Florence, Alabama bank book. This is a charcoal drawing of Handy's father, Reverend C.B. Handy. This is a portrait of Handy when he was 18, inscribed to his sister Ruth. In 1892, when he was 19, Handy left home for Birmingham to take the exam to become a teacher. He qualified but decided that the pay was too low, so he went to work for a pipe company at $1.85 a day. He joined a jazz quartet and traveled to the Chicago World's Fair, only discovered that it had been postponed a year. Hard years on the road followed, and in 1896 he joined a minstrel show, traveling all over the Midwest and South and Canada, Mexico, and Cuba. In 1905, Handy arrived in Memphis, where he would find his fame. He formed his own band, and the Memphis Blues were born. His first song, Mr. Crump, was the first popular song to include a jazz break and blues notes, which was the suspended and slurred notes which characterized what would become known as the blues. This photo shows Handy's first wife, Elizabeth, and some of their children. Following the death of his first wife, he remarried in 1954 when he was 80 years old. His new bride was his secretary, Irma Louise Logan, who he frequently said had become his eyes. There are ample signed photos of Handy on display, mostly from his older years. Perhaps the holy grail of the museum is this upright piano, the same one that Handy composed St. Louis Blues on in 1914. This photo shows him sitting by the same piano much later in his life. This was his ID and ribbon as a committee member for the National Association of Negro Musicians. His tobacco pipe and Masonic ashtray are also on display. This is a picture of Handy with one of his sons, as well as a rosewood cane presented by his son. This is the actual school bell used by Handy's schoolteacher, Y.A. Wallace. This is one of the prized possessions of the museum, one of Handy's cornets on display behind glass. By the way, his favorite musical instrument is depicted on his headstone in the Bronx Cemetery. Among those he called friends included singer and actress Ethel Waters. President Dwight Eisenhower's original letter to Handy, thanking him for adding to the inauguration, is also on display. Some of Handy's personal possessions are on display, like this teacup, as well as this baseball given to Handy signed by players on the St. Louis Cardinals team. Thank you so much for watching this episode of History Hunters and helping us to honor the memory of Little Richard and Debbie C. Handy.